Hello, Trail Seekers, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. We have the most amazing guest on today. For those of you who have gut issues to resolve, IBS, GERD, anything to do with digestive upset, you will love today's guest, and he has solid information that is going to help you to reverse your issues, to no longer have gut issues. It's really, really exciting. I love it when I can bring you information that I know is going to help you get results in your life. Before you listen to today's show, I have another piece of information that I know will also help you to get results in your life. Just over a month ago, a friend of mine shared with me an invite to a little health lecture that was going on in Seattle. And normally driving into downtown Seattle during rush hour traffic and all the construction would be a nightmare. But my intuition, my gut told me I should definitely go to this health lecture and meet this woman and check it out. And I thought, okay, let's do it. This will be an adventure. We got a babysitter and everything. We carpooled with our friend and we went down there and we met the most wonderful woman. Her name's Kristen. She's been doing this for about 18 years. She travels with her whole family, her husband and her two daughters, and she teaches about the importance of minerals, especially magnesium, and how she reversed major issues that had her bedridden using natural medicine. Doesn't she sound like she'd be a great guest on the show? Well, she's already scheduled. She'll be on the show in September, which is fantastic. And she shared with us that as part of her healing journey, she was seeking the best way to absorb magnesium. Now, if you've listened to the interview that I did with Dr. Carolyn Dean, who is both a medical doctor and a naturopathic physician, it's a 2-hour episode where she shares all of the benefits of magnesium, then you would have learned that magnesium is the most important mineral that our body needs, even more important than calcium. The body uses it to do about 1,800 processes. And then the next most important was something like zinc at 300 processes. Just to give you a comparison, it's so, so important. And so many people are deficient in magnesium and don't even know it. Because we can walk around deficient in minerals and we'll have little symptoms like maybe muscle twitches or problems falling asleep or problems staying asleep. We might feel irritable, have really bad PMS or cramping. We might have digestive issues because 1,800 processes in the body need magnesium. There's 77 minerals and elements that the body uses. And then there's magnesium. Magnesium is the most important. So she shares, Kristen, in this health lecture that we went to, said that she sort of scoured the globe for the best way that she could get magnesium in her body. And although she was supplementing, she found it really difficult. And especially those who have digestive issues, they can't absorb enough magnesium. If you try to take it orally and you try to get enough, get fully saturated, then you end up with diarrhea because it'll pass right through you. So the best way to do it then would be IV, which is not a sustainable way. We can't all go to a naturopath or a holistic practitioner every week and get injections of magnesium. So she discovered that there's a type of magnesium that we can actually absorb through our skin. Now, I'm sure you've heard of an Epsom salt bath, for example, and she says those are great, but the amount of magnesium in Epsom salt baths will never have us achieve full saturation. She's done blood tests with people where not only herself, but with groups of people where they've followed them as they've taken different forms of magnesium in different methods, so IV injection or supplementation or soaking, and they've discovered the best way to get magnesium in our body. And then she uncovered the best place to get it. So it's not contaminated, because you could just buy magnesium anywhere, but you don't know if it's contaminated. For example, she shares that a lot of magnesium that's comes from Utah, like the foot soaks, for example, of magnesium you'd get from Utah, it's actually contaminated with heavy metals, defeating the purpose, right? So we have to make sure, just like chlorella and spirulina, that it's best sourced, so it doesn't contain heavy metals or toxins. if we're going to use a substance like a supplement, we want to make sure it has the healthiest quality for us. And so she discovered a place that she could get it that is pure. She has it tested for purity and it's fully concentrated. I was very interested to experience what she was selling, and so she gave us all a foot bath with her magnesium in it while she was giving her lecture. And by the end of it, we could not believe the difference. I've had magnesium injected. I've had IV magnesium, and it felt just as strong doing the foot soak. And she explained that in 40 minutes of sitting there, we had absorbed an average of about 4 grams of magnesium. Now, it would have taken about 4 days of taking magnesium supplementation to get 4 grams in. And with her method, in 1 month, you can fully saturate, you can get to the healthy level, you can reverse a deficiency and fully saturate your body with magnesium. So I bought a few bottles. I said, this is it. We're all going to try it. A few of my friends decided to join me. A few of my family members, my son, which he's 3 years old. So you throw kids in a bath with it, and you put about an eighth of a cup, because it's very concentrated. And all it is liquid magnesium, concentrated magnesium. You put it in the bath, totally safe. You don't feel it. It's not stinging or anything. And kids absorb it. And so we brought it home. And the next day we did a bath with our son. And that was the first night ever that he is asked to go to sleep. He's like, okay, I'm ready for bed. And he fell asleep. There was no fight. There was no, struggle with him, because normally kids fight and they want to stay up longer. He went to bed easily and he slept for more than we've ever seen him sleep. And we did too. My husband, who normally wakes up like at the crack of dawn, like at 4:30 in the morning, he slept in and he couldn't believe it. And we both went, okay, is this a coincidence? Let's keep doing this. So our whole family has been doing this foot soak or the bath, because you can soak in the bath too, every day for 30 days. And I wanted to wait to share this experience with you. I mean, the first day we did it, I wanted to tell you guys about it, but I really wanted to wait and just feel for myself and see it in my family. Did we get the results that were promised us? And absolutely yes, we did. I could not believe it. And in fact, I've been taking a liquid magnesium supplement for 7 years that I love. I love it. I adore it. It's done great things for me. And I decided to stop taking it because I know when I stop taking it, within days, I get sort of restless legs. I get poor sleep. I start to experience basically magnesium deficiency. And I stopped taking my supplement because I wanted to see if this was an adequate replacement, if it really was doing what she said it would do. And sure enough, I was able to fully absorb all my magnesium and more from this foot soak than I ever have with any supplement. I was really, really excited to hear that. And anytime a friend came over, we gave them a foot soak. We've had a few people stay as guests. They all did soak their feet and noticed that they got the best sleep of their life. So if you are looking for better sleep, if you have restless legs, if you have irritability, if you have bad PMS or cramps, you definitely want to give this a try. If you have even aches and pains or like lower back pain, kind of aching, or sometimes tension headaches, all those can be a sign of magnesium deficiency. And the list goes on and on. There's hundreds of things on the list for magnesium deficiency. Now, I contacted Kristen after I had seen all these results with my son and my husband and myself, and I said to her, I need to tell my listeners about this, and I'd love it if you gave a discount. And so she generously is giving a discount. She has very small margins because she really is mission driven. She will cover half of the shipping, so it's a flat rate, $8 shipping for you, no matter how many bottles you buy. And she's going to give you 10% off, which is very, very generous. I definitely recommend that you guys give this a try. One bottle will last you, and it should last you and your partner, so you and your husband or you and your child, basically last 2 people for a whole month. And for an adult, you do a quarter of a cup. You want to measure it out so that you don't waste it, because you don't need to do more than that. And you put it in a little foot basin. Make sure the foot basin is glass or metal, not plastic. Or you put it in the bath. And so it's a quarter cup for adults, an eighth of a cup for children. And if the child's 100 pounds and 13 years old, you just give them an adult dose. And you want to soak for 40 minutes, minimum 20 minutes. Don't need to do more than 40 minutes. And afterwards, take that water, if it's in a foot bath, and go outside and throw it in your garden, and throw it in a different spot every time. But your flowers and if you have growing vegetables or your lawn, it will go so green. I put it on my flower bed and I could not believe the flowers just exploded in color. But you will absorb the most your body can absorb in those 40 minutes. So it's just a little bit of minerals left over, and you will absorb about 4 grams of magnesium a day from each time you soak your feet. We started doing it every evening, and it became a beautiful routine that we'd, have our son in the bath, and he'd soak during his bath, and then we would put him to bed, and then my husband and I would sit in the living room and soak our feet together while we read or talked or, looked at our laptops or whatever. And it just became a nice winding down routine, but it has changed our sleep. And we were already really good sleepers. It made our sleep deep and easy, and we fall asleep easy, and we feel so rested. So I'm excited to hear what you think about it. To buy this product and try it for yourself, I would say just buy 1 bottle to start. But if you have a friend or family member, buy a bottle for them too, because that's what I did. I bought some bottles for my friends so they could try it too, the ones that I knew it would make a huge difference for. And so the website is, and of course we'll put this link also in the show notes if you happen to be driving. But the website is livingthegoodlifenaturally.com, livingthegoodlifenaturally.com, and the coupon code for your 10% off is LTH, as in Learn True Health. So LTH gives you 10% off, and it's livingthegoodlifenaturally.com. You'll see there's other magnesium-related products on her website. She says that believe it or not, the number one selling thing is the pain cream. The magnesium pain cream works wonders. She really recommends that specifically to target pain areas. But for deficiency and reversing deficiency and making sure the body's fully nutrified with magnesium, go for the magnesium foot soak. And please email me, Ashley at Learn True Health, and let me know what you think. Let me know how it works for you, because it's been amazing for everyone, my whole family and my friends that I've shared it with. So I look forward to hearing from you as well. And it'll be really fun to tell Kristen when she comes on the show in September, everyone's experience of it. Thank you so much for being a listener. Enjoy today's interview. Please share it with your friends and family who you know have heartburn or on medications for IBS or any kind of digestive related issues, because this might be the answer they've been looking for. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 279. I am so excited to have on the show today Norm Robillard. He is a Ph.D., founder of Digestive Health Institute. His website is digestivehealthinstitute.org. So many of my listeners are dealing with digestive issues, whether it's heartburn and also known as acid reflux or GERD, whether it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, IBS, Crohn's, colitis, maybe just indigestion. Maybe you don't have a diagnosis yet and you're just having chronic constipation or diarrhea, or just like a gas or upset stomach, or you just can't tolerate certain foods, and maybe you don't have a gallbladder. Maybe you're having gallbladder issues. All sorts of things that people can have that has to do with all kinds of symptoms that come up when we have digestive issues. And it affects every moment of our life. I know if someone has diarrhea, it affects every moment of their life. They're worried about going to work or going out, or they just want to stay home because they have to be near a toilet. And it affects our mood and our energy. There's a huge connection between our emotional health and our gut health, our mental health and our gut health. And I love that our guest today is going to teach us the steps we need to take to start gaining back our health, especially around our gut. We have a Facebook group, Learn True Health Facebook group. I'd love for all of you to join it. It's pinned to the top of the Facebook group, a little survey, and I gave a bunch of examples of different topics, and I asked, what topic are you most interested in learning about? And right now, who's winning out of all the topics, the number one topic that listeners are voting for is digestive health. So Norm, you have a lot of the ear of a lot of my listeners, and I know they're really excited to learn from you today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashley. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on. That was
Absolutely.
quite an introduction. Well put.
Well, I'm really fascinated to learn your story. I know that you have a personal story that obviously has led you to want to go so deep. A PhD is such a deep, not many people go that far into their education and into the understanding. And so you have such a deep understanding, and that you love to help people get results with food, which food is medicine. And you really love to teach people how to get results without drugs. So you are really in the right place today. I'd love for you to start by telling your story and how what happened to you personally and professionally in your life that led you to where you are today and led you to develop your theory on how what causes these digestive issues and how we can resolve them.
Sure, I'd be glad to. You had mentioned IBS and SIBO in your introduction, and I did want to begin by talking about my own story with chronic acid reflux. But in that story, I realized there were some connections that really tied reflux mechanistically to the same situation with irritable bowel syndrome. We know that IBS is connected to this thing called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, right? Based on work starting in the late 90s from Professor John Hunter in the UK, and then especially everybody knows the work of Dr. Mark Pimentel's group at Cedars-Sinai, showing pretty conclusively that people with IBS have something going on with too many bacteria in the small intestine, possibly even excessive fermentation. That's when bacteria ferment carbohydrates and make a lot of gas, even in the early part of the large intestine. So you could think of it as SIBO and LIBO. And so that work is pretty well established. But some years ago, and you're right, my background is microbiology. And I spent most of my career in biotech and in pharma working for companies on new drugs. But during that time, and this was quite a few years ago, I was really suffering with chronic acid reflux. And I had very little idea about what it was, what caused it. I had no idea if there was a connection to diet. I was never on a diet. I was in my mid-30s, and I was just struggling with this. It was really interfering with my own, work, my sleep, my general well-being. Even the medicines from my own industry, proton pump inhibitors and H2 blockers, even though they helped with the symptoms a little bit, I still noticed that I just wasn't well. I was still refluxing and regurgitating, and so even at night, I'd wake up sometimes in the middle of the night gasping for air where I had aspirated this reflux into my lungs. And it was a little scary too. So I really didn't know much about this area of study. As a microbiologist, I was more focused on pathogens and so forth, but I had worked with some gut bacteria. I worked with Bacteroides fragilis, one of the major players in the gut when I was a postdoctoral fellow at Tufts. I worked on E. coli. But something happened to me that was just pretty much an accident. In 2004, so that's 14 years or so ago, I just happened to go on a low carbohydrate diet with my son, who was an athletic trainer at the time. And he said, "Dad, you could lose a few pounds. Let's get a treadmill and we'll go on a low carb diet." And so we did that. But what amazed me was even before I lost any weight, my reflux that I had had for many, many years essentially went away. And I just couldn't believe it. I was so impressed. And so I started reading about it and, noticed it in a couple of low carb books. Mike and Mary Denny's Protein Power book. Even Atkins mentions it. The guys down at Duke University had done a couple of small studies. Low carb helped heartburn. So I was like, okay, there's something to it. But why? That was the real question on my mind. Did carbohydrates somehow cause heartburn and acid reflux? It was just, nobody was even asking that question. And I decided I was going to do some research and get to the bottom of it. And I started just by studying how the three food groups are digested: fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. So I read about, when you first eat food, you chew it up, breaks it into small pieces. You've got amylase enzyme in your saliva that immediately starts breaking down the starch. You swallow it and your stomach secretes acid and pepsin and other enzymes. And so you start breaking down the proteins and even some of the fats. And then you go to the small intestine. And I was just getting ready to read about, the pancreatic enzymes that are released and bile to help, solubilize the fats. But before I could really get into all the digestion that happens in the small intestine, a thought hit me like a ton of bricks. Because as I said, I had grown a lot of these organisms in the lab, and I knew two things about these bacteria, and these are gut bacteria. They love carbohydrates. They're saccharolytic. That means they prefer carbohydrate as a fuel source, and they produce a lot of gas. And we hear a lot about that now in discussion boards and online. And there's a lot more research about that: hydrogen and methane from these archaea organisms, carbon dioxide, and even some hydrogen sulfide. So this theory popped into my head, and I thought, what if I am not digesting carbohydrates as well as I did when I was 18 or 20 years old? Now I'm 35. I'm struggling with acid reflux. If I didn't digest these carbohydrates that well, or if I was consuming more of them, it would make sense that more of those carbohydrates would escape digestion and absorption in my small intestine, and hence efficiently get into my bloodstream. And they would persist in the small intestine, potentially fueling blooms or overgrowths of these gut bacteria. And they would be producing a lot of gas, and pressure would build up in my intestines, just like I was feeling. I was belching all the time. I was refluxing. That gas pressure works its way back into the stomach. And by the way, the pyloric valve between the small intestine and the stomach is not a true sphincter. So this gas pressure can translate into the stomach. It's actually well studied and well known that people with GERD have more pressure in their stomach. And so what if this gas pressure from carbs and malabsorption and bacterial overgrowth was forcing reflux like a little volcano, or dropping a Mentos candy into a bottle of Coke? That it was pushing its way through this lower esophageal sphincter valve at the top of the stomach. So this was a completely different idea than the theory that had stood for 60 years, that people that had reflux had dysfunction in this lower esophageal sphincter valve. It was either weaker or it was relaxing. And that theory went unchallenged for 60 years. So this was a new way of looking at an old problem. And as I researched this, I've now written a couple of books on this. I found that there was an overwhelming amount of evidence supporting this view, as opposed to one that focused on a dysfunctional sphincter muscle. And the great thing about looking at GERD this way and reflux this way, and I do believe I'm correct. I absolutely believe this is correct. And we're in the clinic and working to prove this more thoroughly. But it opens up new treatment options. Instead of reducing acid with proton pump inhibitors and H2 blockers, you need the acid. Those drugs are bad for you. Instead of doing that, you can focus on ways to control reflux itself while keeping stomach acid, which is really important for good health. So, that's how I got into it. And that was 14 years ago. And so first of all, my performance in the industry definitely didn't improve once I was focused on this. And so in the end, I found that I couldn't work on the drugs anymore, and I just felt more, it was more important to really create dietary strategies and other strategies, behavioral and root cause analysis, all aimed at minimizing malabsorption, minimizing this bacterial overgrowth and gas, and thus not only correcting acid reflux, but all of these functional gastrointestinal conditions, IBS, reflux, leaky gut. So there's all your autoimmune conditions, other systemic conditions, rosacea, fibromyalgia. So I realized there's this whole area that could benefit from this kind of work and this kind of research beyond acid reflux. So I just never looked back. I've been doing 14 years later, I'm still doing it and loving
Oh, I have so many questions for you.
it.
Let's just clarify GERD, acid reflux, and heartburn. They're all the same thing?
Yeah, so it is easy to use those terms interchangeably, but let's pick those apart a little bit. Um, Acid reflux is what's happening, right? They call it acid reflux, but essentially what's in your stomach is refluxing into your esophagus and beyond.
And for those who don't know
And
an esophagus,
yeah,
esophagus.
yeah,
So you put food in your mouth and you swallow it, and in between your
yes,
mouth and your stomach is the esophagus.
perfect.
Great.
Yes. And then between the stomach and the esophagus is this band of muscles called the lower esophageal sphincter muscle. It's a set of muscles and it closes tightly when we're not swallowing. The idea is to prevent things from your stomach refluxing into your esophagus. But with people with acid reflux, that's what's happening. Now, if it happens a lot and it's a chronic condition, and it causes some damage, let's say inflammation in your esophagus, which if you get an endoscopy, they can literally see that it's red and inflamed. People with chronic reflux that have some damage, that's when they term it gastroesophageal reflux disease. So it's just a name for people that have chronic reflux with damage. Heartburn, on the other hand, is one of the major symptoms of reflux. Most people with reflux do suffer with heartburn, but not everybody. There are people that have what is known as laryngopharyngeal reflux, where they don't have any heartburn, but their throat is sore and they feel like they have a lump in their throat, or their sinuses and eustachian tubes are problematic, or they have breathing issues. So there's a respiratory connection. And so these are upper esophageal and throat and vocal cords issues. You can lose your voice too, that are associated with people that have reflux, but they call it laryngopharyngeal reflux.
So a few months ago, this happened to me, and my throat was so sore and it was so swollen, and I took every herb on the planet I know to take to boost the immune system and fight infection, and I was gargling salt water and I was gargling colloidal silver, and nothing was working, and I kept going back to my naturopath. We did strep tests, and we basically swabbed my throat for everything, viruses, bacteria, everything came up clean. And my naturopaths finally said, "You know what? I really think this is reflux." And I said, "There's no way. I don't have acid reflux. My stomach is I have an iron stomach and I'm not feeling any heartburn." She says, "Well, you don't have to feel the heartburn." And so I finally got it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I got to stop eating tofu." I stopped eating tofu, and within 3 days, my sore throat, which was so bad I could hardly swallow. I was in agony. I was in so much pain. I had no other symptoms other than really bad sore throat that was like looked like tonsillitis. And it
Hmm.
went away within 3 days of stopping eating the food that I sort of knew I shouldn't have been, which was tofu. It totally went away. And I went back to my naturopath and I said, "You were right. You were right. It was reflux." So sometimes eating a food that we're sensitive to, one food, innocent food that our body's reacting to could cause this. And like you said, we don't have symptoms, like you don't have that kind of that typical burning in the stomach and burning up the chest. But
Hmm.
it can cause a sore throat because it can irritate the tonsils. Is that correct?
Well, yes, it can. But if we were having a longer chat about your sore throat, I would have a lot of questions for you. So first of all, it is possible that you could just get a sore throat. Viral illness or this or that, or got irritated by something you ate, and you can have a sore throat, and this tissue in the throat is very sensitive, and it takes a while to recover from it. So it's possible you had that it had nothing to do with the tofu, and then just around when you stopped eating tofu, it started to get better. And the reason I'm saying that is just because with this new way of looking at reflux and GERD and LPR, I look at things quite differently. And so what I want to know is, where is the fuel coming from for these bacteria to make a lot of gas? And tofu, most tofu, is very low carbohydrate. So it's mostly protein and a little bit of fat. And so it's considered one of the safe foods, lower what I call FP, or fermentation potential. We talk about that later. I created a mathematical formula to measure how much potential to cause this growth in gas. Call it fermentation potential, FP, but it's really a measure of symptom potential. And tofu is quite low. But I would ask you, if in fact it did turn out to be LPR, I would ask you, what else are you eating? Because a plant-based diet, it's very challenging, because a lot of highly fermentable materials,
Mm.
legumes and certain starches are very fermentable and will cause you to balloon up and have a lot of bloating and distension and reflux and belching and potentially LPR. But I would look beyond the tofu if we were working together or talking about this in more detail, and
Okay,
see
so
what else is going on.
in your experience, it's more to do with the carbs fermenting. Is it inappropriately? Is it that we're not digesting the carbs appropriately, and that's what's causing it to ferment instead of
Mm.
digest?
Mm. It's a great question. I mean, I think it's a combination of things. First of all, it's there are harder to digest carbohydrates, right? For people that are lactose intolerant, lactose is one of them. Fructose is another one. Half the people on the globe malabsorb fructose. There's a whole variety of fibers, many different 10 or more types of fiber. They're not digested at all. So, but they differ in their fermentability. So fiber can be an issue. And then sugar alcohols, right? Those cause a lot of GI distress. No wonder they're not absorbed well, and bacteria can use them as fuel. And then the last one, this is number 5, is resistant starch, which behaves like a dietary fiber. So when you eat a combination of these things, for different people, it's going to differ which ones digest or absorb, some better than others. But the bottom line is that as you increase this load, you have a higher chance of having symptoms. But also, if your digestion is out of whack and you don't digest the carbohydrates as well, say you have an amylase deficiency, which is a pancreatic, yes, you produce it in your saliva, and how much is in your saliva depends on where you evolved from, because there's a gene copy number issue. Some people have lots of gene copy numbers and lots of amylase in the saliva. They don't have any trouble digesting starch. But there's also amylase enzyme released from your pancreas in the small intestine. And if you have any issues with your pancreas, or you're not producing enough amylase there, that can be a problem. There's also other enzymes released from the tips of your microvilli, sucrase and maltase, and basically enzymes that complete the breakdown of starch and other sugars. If there's any problem there, or if your small intestine has been damaged, say you had a bloom of SIBO and a lot of bacteria in your small intestine, these bacteria make their own enzymes, proteases especially, which go out and seek proteins for their own nitrogen needs. And if they see the enzymes around the tips of your microvilli, they might gobble them up. And they can damage these microvilli and villi, damage the lining of your small intestine. And that can lead to even worse, hampered digestion and more malabsorption. So there's so many things that can feed into this. Damage to the small intestine from bacterial overgrowth, or other things, having celiac disease, any number of other Crohn's. There's a whole variety of things that can affect how well your small intestine works, even drugs. And on top of that, if you consume more of these than you're capable of digesting, that in and of itself can cause the symptoms. So that's why the diet that I created from all of this information over the last 14 years is called the Fast Tract. The book is called Fast Tract Digestion, TRACT. And there's one on heartburn and there's one on IBS. But that's why it focuses on 3 areas. One is as you said, just limiting these hard to digest carbohydrates quantitatively using this calculation, these FP points. And there's tables that show you. You just look up the food and you see how many points. And if it's a high point, you avoid it. So that one part's about the food. The other part is about identifying and addressing all of these underlying causes that can make SIBO and excessive fermentation worse. So we talked about some of them: diabetes, Crohn's, drugs, dysbiosis, immune deficiencies, motility, stomach acidity. All of those things are underlying causes. You need to figure out which ones are happening. In your case, most of them can be ruled out, but you need to find out if there's some of those are causing your problem and then address those. So you may have to work with a doctor or a practitioner to help you through that. And then the third thing is also really important, and that's behaviors and practices that you can do, that everybody can do, that will minimize malabsorption and optimize digestion. So even eating slowly and chewing really well to give the amylase you do have in your saliva more time to digest the starch. That's one simple thing people can do. How you select, prepare, store, and consume foods is important as well. Look at starch. If you cook, say you cook a jasmine rice, which is, for reasons we can talk about, a low FP, safer starch for people with these conditions. But if you cook it until it's light and fluffy and it's moist, it's very easy to digest. But if you refrigerate it overnight, resistant starch builds up in it. It's like a crystallization process. And that is more like a fiber. So if you eat leftover rice the next day, even if it's one of the safer rices, you could have some pretty dramatic symptoms.
That's really
Yeah.
fascinating.
So there's a lot going on there. There's rabbit holes everywhere you look.
I love it. Well, we're going to get into some of those rabbit holes. To go back to heartburn, the theory, so if you go to an MD with symptoms of GERD, acid reflux, or heartburn, whatever we want to call it, they'll typically give us an antacid, so a drug that blocks, is it called?
H2 blocker, proton pump inhibitor.
There it is. And so they'll give us something that significantly alters the stomach and its efficiency for digestion. And we're coming to an MD with a digestion problem, and they're like, "Here, let me prevent your stomach from working further," which will temporarily relieve symptoms. But then they're now hooked on that drug because if they get off of it, they get a huge backlash of symptoms. And then down the road, they're going to have further issues because now they're still eating the same way, by the way. They haven't changed how they're eating. But now they're further having complications because now their body is not digesting even more so it's not absorbing even more so now we're building up issues down the road. So when people come to you, they've often been on these drugs, and now you're going to have to help them to heal from that and get off the drugs. How do you do that?
Mm. Yeah, good point. And I do work with a lot of people, and a lot of people that are taking, these strong proton pump inhibitors are the most potent one because they block the actual production of stomach acid. So they're very strong and they really get rid of your stomach acid. The H2 blockers block the release of stomach acid, not the production. So they're kind of middle of the road, still not great for you. And then antacids just neutralize the stomach acid that's already there. So they're the least invasive of the acid reducing medicines. They'll help your symptoms for an hour or so, and then the stomach acid comes back. But PPIs are the strongest one, and they are really bad for people long term. Short term, they're not that big of a deal probably, but these drugs were only designed for people to be on them for a month or two, so a matter of weeks or maybe a month or two. But what happens is people go on them and they feel better. Not all of them, only half. Half of the people get satisfactory symptom control on PPIs and half don't. So there's a huge number of people where this drug does not meet their medical need. And symptom-wise, half the people do feel better. But here's what's happening if they stay on a long time. Having no stomach acid is really bad for your digestion. You won't absorb vitamins properly, especially some like the B vitamins and B12 in particular, the fat soluble vitamins, so D and E and A. It will inhibit mineral absorption, and some of the important ones are magnesium and calcium and iron. But magnesium in particular, you can get hypomagnesemia on these proton pump inhibitors, and that affects your bones, your nerves, and your cardiovascular health. So
Mm.
this is actually a dangerous condition. And when you have that, sometimes if you stay on the PPIs, even supplementing with the magnesium isn't helpful. You'll have to take injections. So and that's just the beginning with these PPIs. They actually feed into SIBO, right? Because stomach acid, is one of your control mechanisms to control an overgrowth of these bacteria. They decrease the diversity of your gut. A lot of people I work with, they have very low diversity. So their gut bacteria are not very robust. People on PPIs are much more susceptible to getting a Clostridia difficile infection, which is very serious. They're less successful treating it, and they're more apt to get it again. They're more susceptible to pneumonia, dementia, and heart attacks. So long term, these are not a good solution. So when I work with people and they're taking these, if they're prescribed by their doctor, what I do is I give them some notes, what I think, and also an example of a regimen to how to wean off of these, and maybe taking a little, some Tums as a rescue medicine, or Gaviscon, to get off the PPIs. And I tell them to take the notes to your doctor and just have a discussion, because long term, getting off these PPIs and other acid reducing medicines is actually part of the solution. It's not just like I don't need them anymore, I need to get off them. It's part of the solution.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah.
I love it. You talked a bit about good bacteria and bad bacteria. We're definitely going to dive down that rabbit hole, but a question for me came up. Does having a diverse good bacteria in the intestines prevent bad bacteria, or is good bacteria, a diverse good bacteria in the intestines, a result of a good diet and good digestion, and that's why their bad bacteria is at bay?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no question that a diverse gut microbiota is healthy in so many regards, and this from people that take a lot of antibiotics. The diversity is really knocked down, so they end up with, they can get high numbers of bacteria coming back, but they're not very diverse, and so a lot of times some of them are gas producing, and so you can get a lot of symptoms. You can get bloating and all of these symptoms we talked about. But it doesn't mean it's healthy just because a lot of bacteria come back. In fact, we know that people that take antibiotics have a much higher risk of developing a C. diff, Clostridia difficile infection. So much so that C. diff infection is also sometimes called diarrhea associated C. diff. It's antibiotic associated diarrhea is the term. So C. diff is so common in people that take antibiotics that they've given it a name, antibiotic associated diarrhea. So what's happening there? Well, there was a good study. It was done in mice, but it provided a scientific rationale for what could be happening when people take antibiotics. And it was done by Justin Sonensin, I think that's how his name's pronounced, out in California. And his lab looked at mice that were given antibiotics. And what they found was that as soon as they went on antibiotics, it knocked down the number of their gut microbes quite a bit. And it increased the amount of carbohydrate and sugars in the intestines, because the bacteria that were normally there consuming it were gone or diminished in numbers. And so this increase in sugar including something called sialic acid that's actually released in your mucus, right? Another form of carbohydrate is your mucus. It's 80% sugar. So not only are you getting carbs from your diet, you're getting it from mucus as well. But they had this increase in available sugar. Bacteria were diminished, and in comes pathogens like Salmonella or Clostridia difficile, and they have plenty of food. The competition is diminished, and it's easy for them to set up shop. So even though
Mm.
that study was done in mice, I think it really points to the risk you're taking when you take antibiotics. And I am in no way telling people not to take antibiotics when they truly need them, but there really are risks taking them, and they're a shotgun approach. They are not going to just go in there and focus on the bad bacteria. They are going to also kill or inhibit the protective strains as well. So, and then of course, just this general concerns with too much overuse of antibiotics. There's a lot of resistance now in the hospitals, things like methicillin resistant Staph aureus, carbapenem resistant Enterobacteriaceae. So strains of bacteria like pathogenic E. coli and Klebsiella pneumonia. There's some 250 to a million people a year being infected with antibiotic resistant bacteria,
Mm.
and something like 20 to 25,000 deaths every year from the overuse of antibiotics. So, of course, when you really have to take them, say you got bit like I did a year or two ago from Lyme tick and got Lyme disease, collapsed on the couch with a flu, recovered the tick, confirmed it was Lyme, and I had to take doxycycline. I hated taking it. It was really rough on my gut. But when you really need to, you need to.
Mm-hmm.
But we should just be much more careful when we take that, and especially for functional GI issues, because really science-based diets are evolving. And I really think that as these get better, and the fast track diet mirrors what's in the textbook of primary and acute care medicine for the types of carbohydrates you should limit to avoid having too much intestinal gas. As these diets evolve, I really think they should be the first thing used to treat these conditions and not the last. Not first try all the drugs and the
Mm-hmm.
antibiotics. And these drugs, they just target the symptoms anyway. They're really pretty terrible. Um, antidiarrheals, laxative, pain meds. People
Mm-hmm.
take nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories like candy, but they are very, believe it or not, risky. Not just the risk of ulceration that people talk about, but a risk of damage to um, the to your small intestine. They cause risks and tears that many think is actually a more significant issue than even inflammation and ulceration in the stomach.
And
So
which drugs do this? Small tears?
non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. So all of there's a whole variety of them: ibuprofen, acetaminophen, the COX-1 and COX-2 inhibitors in general. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of those out there, and um, there is some research to kind of pick and choose between them, which damage you're most worried about and what you can do about it. A lot of doctors give these drugs now with PPIs, which does help minimize the stomach impact in the gastritis and a possible ulcer. But this lower small intestine tears, which leads to leaky gut and inflammation, it's quite a serious condition. The PPIs might actually make that part of it worse. So, and guess what's involved? Bacteria and bile are involved in that kind of damage as well. And so, yeah, going on a diet that limits fermentable carbs may actually make these NSAIDs a little less impactful on your small intestine. But more research is needed in that area. But it's a significant issue.
Absolutely. Considering how many people just take Advil over the counter like candy,
Oh yeah,
for yeah. So many people. My beef is that so many people are dehydrated, but they'll just take a 3 Advil, right, with their coffee or something, or with their Coke, with and not with drink water, and they think. I mean, we've heard of, oh, Tylenol. We shouldn't take Tylenol because it's bad for the liver. Okay, I'm gonna take Advil then. And then now we're hearing that it's slowly poison for our gut. It's slowly destroying our gut. Now,
yeah.
a minute ago, you mentioned that there's also a role that bile plays in this. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Mm. Well, I'm poring over a few papers right now looking into this issue because I'm really concerned with it, and I want my readers to know more about it. But the idea is there's a concern that these nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories are actually becoming recycled with bile. Bile salts are produced in the liver. They're collected in the gallbladder, if you have one, and then they're squirted into the small intestine when you eat, especially when you eat fatty meals. And they help the fats mix with the water so that lipase can digest them better and so they can be broken down and absorbed. So bile is really important. It also is antimicrobial. It helps keep some of the bad bacteria at bay from getting into your small intestine. But here's the thing about bile. It's an expensive molecule to make. It's made from cholesterol. And your body doesn't want to keep making it every single time for every round of digestion. So what it does is recycle it in the terminal ileum of the small bowel. Bile is recycled back to the liver and then reprocessed so that it can be released again. And apparently these nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories may be recycling with the bile so they can damage your small
Oh my
intestine kind of over and
gosh.
over again.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just to illustrate this, our for those who don't understand anatomy, in order to digest fat, fat doesn't digest in the stomach, it digests after the stomach in the small intestines. The liver produces the bile, puts in a little sac, and then the sac squeezes the bile, like you're squeezing a balloon every time the stomach empties into the small intestines, and that little amount of bile squeezes in, it gets mixed up in the small intestines, digests the fat, and then
Well,
you're saying,
the bile doesn't digest it, but what it does is help because fats, right? If you ever mixed vinegar with oil, you know they don't mix, right? So the fats won't mix with the aqueous environment in your small intestine, so it's hard to access them with the lipase enzymes. But with bile, it helps them mix together with the water in your small intestine,
got
so
it.
the enzymes can then access the fat molecules.
So does bile contain any enzymes to digest fat?
No.
Okay, this is good. So where are those enzymes? Are those come from the stomach, or those come from the small
The
intestine?
stomach does produce protein digesting enzymes, pepsin and chymotrypsin and a few others. And it also does, there are some lipases released in your stomach that already start working on the fat, but most of the lipase is produced from the pancreas and released down the pancreatic duct, and it's kind of mixes with the bile along the way, and it's squirted into the small intestine. So that's the three main enzymes produced by the pancreas are lipase, amylase, and protease. So one for all three food groups.
Got it. And so the lipase, which digests fat, is that does the pancreas um squirt that into the
The gallbladder.
gallbladder?
No, the liver produces it and it's transported to the gallbladder. And then it's released down a tube that kind of merges with the pancreatic ducts. And so the enzymes in the bile are released together, even though they're produced and stored in different organs.
Great. Okay, so to clarify, the lipase comes from the pancreas, goes straight into the small intestine. It doesn't get stored with the bile, but it gets released at the same time. So the bile is there to break it up so that the lipase from the pancreas can digest it.
There you go.
And then because it takes cholesterol to make it, which is a commodity that our body really needs. And that's a topic for a whole other discussion, how important healthy cholesterol is. All these people are on anti-cholesterol
I don't have
medications.
enough cholesterol.
I
Help
know,
me.
right? And if you don't have enough cholesterol, you can't make bile, so that which bile is needed in order to make to help digest the fats. And then boom, now we've got this catch-22 where we need more fat, but we don't have enough to make something to digest the fats or help digest the fats. So then the body takes the bile and reabsorbs it, putting it the back to the liver. The liver puts it back into that little gallbladder, if we still have one, if we haven't had it surgically removed. If not, it would just continually drip and out of the liver into the small intestine. And you're saying that NSAIDs like Advil, something over the counter that anyone can get access to, once taken, it's possible that it keeps getting recycled over and over again. So it keeps damaging for days or weeks or months after taking it. It's still in our system, in our small intestines, continually damaging them and being reused over and over again because it's kind of stuck. It's kind of stuck now with the bile.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea behind what's going on. And
This
so
is scary.
the process, the problem, if people want to read more about that, is called NSAID enteropathy. So that's the term if they want to understand, if they want to read more, because there's papers and studies on this about how these damage the small intestine.
Very interesting. Thank you for taking the time to explain that landmine because a lot of people are looking to heal their gut and then they're maybe they have a headache, they go for the Advil thinking that it's totally safe, but they're now doing further damage to their gut. And so we want to help them find safe alternatives and get them back on track instead of taking something that could continue to harm them.
Yeah, I mean it is a fascinating area. I'm planning to do a blog on this because a lot of people have that question. Well, my doctor wants me to take this pain reliever for my arthritis, but he wants me to take a PPI with it. And as I started to just kind of look into this, because it does seem like there's pretty good support for taking PPIs with NSAIDs in terms of the damage to your stomach, inflammation, and ulcers. But there's this other side that's really it's considered by many to be a more serious problem, and so it needs to be, we need to understand it before we just have too many people following that path of PPIs with these pain meds. A good review for people, by the way, I just kind of looked it up while we were talking, is from John Wallace in the British Journal of Pharmacology, called NSAID Gastropathy and Enteropathy. So it's a good review that will, at least it's a good place to start to get a general feel for what the concerns are, what's going on.
Thank you. Now, we talked about the person that goes to the MD gets put on the drugs, and we know that that was sort of a losing battle because they're not addressing the root cause. And then there's some people might go to an ND, so naturopath or a chiropractor, someone who has a functional medicine background, and they go, aha, well, this is the holistic theory of heartburn is that your lower esophageal sphincter is not closing all the way because it's not being stimulated by enough hydrochloric acid. And that's the real problem. We need to up the hydrochloric acid or increase the acidity. So take some digestive enzymes with HCl, drink some vinegar like apple cider vinegar. And some people notice that that helps and they go, oh, thank you so much, you know, naturopathic doctor,
Mm,
you've helped
mm.
me because that was the root cause. The root cause was I wasn't making enough hydrochloric acid. But now what you're saying is are you saying that that is not actually the root cause? There's one layer deep, which is that the gas was building up because your body was basically fermenting carbs instead of digesting them, and that was causing it to push open that lower esophageal sphincter and let the gastric juices splash up. Um, and so the reason why the naturopaths sort of gave the right idea, and that if you give a digestive enzymes, now the body's now we're digesting instead of fermenting, so now there's less gas, and now their symptoms go away. So we thought that that was really the root cause when it wasn't. Am I sort of seeing it
Mm,
correctly?
mm. Yeah, you're stating it correctly, and I think you bring up a good a good topic for us to talk about. So let's get into that. So there is this idea out there, and it was popularized by Jonathan Wright's book, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You. It's a real popular book, and a lot of people think immediately, if they think they have acid reflux or GERD, they think they don't have enough stomach acid, and they act on it. Sometimes they'll take bitters, or they'll drink vinegar, or they'll take betaine HCl supplements. And some people do find that those types of interventions help them. And so that suggests maybe there is a minority of people where maybe they're not making enough stomach acid. So let's look at that in terms of the studies that have been done. So if you want to look at a population of people that don't have enough stomach acid, you want to look at people with something called atrophic gastritis, right? And oftentimes it's from abuse of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, like we were just talking about, or a chronic infection with Helicobacter pylori, a bacteria that's shaped like a corkscrew, drills through your mucus, anchors on your stomach lining, and over a period of years damages your stomach lining. And if it damages it in a certain way in a certain place, it affects your parietal cells and you lose the ability to produce adequate amounts of stomach acid. So these are people with atrophic gastritis and low stomach acid. Well, they've studied those people and found that these people with low stomach acid in this atrophic gastritis have a 50% lower risk of something called esophagitis. And we talked about that before, right? When you have a lot of reflux and chronic GERD and your esophagus is literally red and inflamed and irritated and damaged, that's esophagitis. But people with low stomach acid had a 50% lower risk of having that. So that suggests that low stomach acid will be better, not worse, for people that were refluxing, number one. And then along the same vein, there was 2 Japanese studies and then a very large German study, over 9,000 people, I think, in that German study, that showed an inverse association between atrophic gastritis, the same situation with low stomach acid, inverse relationship with having that and having low stomach acid and GERD. So 3 studies, I think a couple of the Japanese ones, I think at least one of those was a good size study, and the German study was huge. And so that inverse association is saying that people that have low stomach acid have less GERD, not more. So, and then just one more thing to add to that, kids with cystic fibrosis, right? This is a little bit of a different situation. Kids with cystic fibrosis, because of the genetic basis of the disease, they make a lot of mucus. It's produced in the lungs, and it's very challenging, right, causing breathing difficulties and all of this. But that same mucus is produced in the pancreatic ducts that we were just talking about, where digestive enzymes are released from, right? And they have mucus there, and they can't release digestive enzymes. They all need to be on supplements. But 80% of these kids with cystic fibrosis have chronic GERD. And so there's no indication they have anything wrong with their stomach acid, but yet 80% of them have GERD. So certainly low stomach acid isn't enough to have GERD. It's associated with less risk of GERD and esophagitis. So for most people with GERD, low stomach acid is not the problem. There was also another study a pharmaceutical company did. Okay, people discredit that immediately, but it was actually some good research, some teenagers, and they looked at a whole bunch, 60 of these kids, and they all had normal amounts of stomach acid. So for most people, I don't think they have low stomach acid, but there is a minority of people that will have this atrophic gastritis, low stomach acid, and they can have symptoms and what it's known as non-acid reflux. And so the answer to your question is actually yes, you can have low stomach acid and you can still have symptoms. But for most people with heartburn, GERD, esophagitis, they have normal amounts of stomach acid. It's not low. Because people with low stomach acid they'll less commonly have those symptoms. Now, maybe a separate time we can get together and talk about laryngopharyngeal reflux. The one where the symptoms are all up in the throat, and the lump in the throat and the sore throat and the breathing issues in eustachian tubes. Those people are literally not helped at all by proton pump inhibitors, by those drugs. They've done many studies, and that it's drugs like Nexium are no better than placebo for LPR. So I just don't know why they continue to be prescribed. They're no better than placebo. And so why is that? And is it possible that other things are the problem, not the acid? Because if you take Nexium, it neutralizes, or you can't produce the acid, but you still can reflux bile, digestive enzymes, pepsin, pancreatic enzymes, bacterial end products. So all of this stuff can still reflux and irritate the throat. And the Nexium or the other PPI drugs won't do anything to those other insulting molecules.
Now you said we could reflux bile. That means that it's this, like you'd said, the small intestine, the content of the small intestines is coming up into the stomach and then refluxing up into the throat, basically up into the esophagus.
Yes. And not only has it been well established that bile reflux occurs, when they look for it, they find it. You can look for non-acid reflux elements by using impedance and so forth. So bile has been found in the stomach and in the esophagus. It can reflux, but it also makes sense based on the mechanism that I'm proposing with this theory of acid reflux. It's bacterial overgrowth, bacterial gas, pressure building up. And so reflux is starting much further in the intestines. It's not just originating in the stomach, like the original theory thought. It was just the sphincter was out of whack and whatever's in the stomach is refluxing. So it makes sense that things from the intestines will be refluxing as well.
Right. And if they are, what you're saying is that they prove that that is happening, that then your theory is now proven. Because the like you said, if your body is not digesting, it's fermenting, right? Because the it's sort of like I always tell people about food combining. Don't eat a steak and an apple at the same time. You know, it takes maybe 20 minutes for the body to, you know, have the apple go through the stomach, and now it's ready to pass it along to the next part of the body. But a steak is going to sit there for probably an hour or more. And so if you eat a steak and an apple at the same time, the steak is still in the stomach digesting. The apple is going to start fermenting at that point. And so there's this thing, you know, where we have to be conscious of food combining, because that's going to cause all this gas. Well, now you're saying that with this gas is this fermenting. If we're not digesting, we're fermenting the carbs, and it's pushing, because the gas has got to go somewhere, and if it can't go out one end, it's going out the other. And if it's pushing up, it's even from the small intestines, it's going to push some of the content of the small intestines all the way up, so that now that all that gastric juice and all the juice from the intestines is now harming the esophagus, harming our throat, and burning and you know, frankly, being in a place in our body that's not supposed to. And that's why it does all that damage, because, you know, the esophagus and the sphincter is not supposed to have all that juice pushing with force
Right,
from the gas, right?
right. And by the way, there is evidence that stopping the reflux itself is effective for LPR. And here's where that comes from. They've done studies where people with LPR have had a surgical procedure where the surgeon literally tightens the lower esophageal sphincter. It's called a fundoplication. There's a strata, a lynx. There's different versions of this procedure to tighten the lower esophageal sphincter. But what they found when you do these procedures, that you do get less reflux. They knew that. The surgery for many people is effective for preventing reflux. And so LPR symptoms, as well as symptoms of asthma, people with asthma, improve after those procedures. So I'm not recommending that procedure for a lot of other reasons. You know, it has a lot of side effects. It carries some risks. It is invasive. But as a proof of principle, it does show you that if you can control the reflux, not worry about the acid, you want your acid, but if you can control the reflux, you can improve LPR, asthma, as well as all the other symptoms of reflux, acid and non-acid reflux. So what I'm saying is if you use a diet like the Fast Track diet, and you know, you might want to get the mobile app too, because it helps you do the diet, you can control the reflux itself. And so you can get off those acid medicines and you can really improve your reflux, asthma, LPR, because there is a proof of principle that is valid that stopping reflux is where it's at. So you need to get these bacteria in your gut on a diet. That's really what you need to do. We talk about diets a lot, but really we need like a Weight Watchers plan for the bacteria in our gut. Because let's face it, in the Western diet, we just have access to so much food and so many snack foods and so many carbohydrates. So yeah, I've been doing this myself for the last 14 years, and I never have acid reflux except for once in a great while. if I'm on vacation or I'm eating all the wrong foods or I'm drinking too many IPAs, beers that I love. And so I know why if I do have a breakthrough symptom, I know where it came from. But for the most part, it's just not an issue for me for 14 years now, eating this way myself and the behaviors and making sure I'm healthy overall.
Now, to clarify, those who can have asthma from GERD because it's flashing up and then they're breathing it in, and so maybe even small particulates of digestive fluid is getting in their lungs and causing irritation and damage. Is that correct?
Mm. I would say it's not the acid. It's just like LPR. It's not the acid. It's something else. And here's how I know that. There's something called the SARA study that was done. I don't know how many centers all over the U.S. and 1,000. I think it was 1,000 kids with asthma. And by the way, kids with asthma, 80% of them have chronic acid reflux. And
Oh my
so the
gosh.
drug companies thought, wow, this is great that if, since they have acid reflux and they have asthma, all we have to do is come in with Nexium and cure the asthma, cure the reflux, cure the asthma, and we've got a new market there. So
Oh,
they put a lot of money into this big study, over 100 authors on the paper. And the results were it didn't help one bit, not one little bit. Nexium was no good for asthma. And here's the part that really got me: this paper, and you've got American Lung Association people and all these authors from all over the country on this thing. And you think somebody would have caught this. The conclusion of the study of the paper was because Nexium does not help asthma, we can conclude that GERD does not cause asthma.
oh my gosh.
And I thought that is just so wrong. All you've shown is that the neutralizing or eliminating the acid doesn't help it, but you're not stopping the bile, you're not stopping the bacteria or enzymes or other pepsin or other things that are refluxing. And studies have shown that people with, again, I'm not recommending a fundoplication operation, but people that have this operation with asthma that tightens the sphincter, their symptoms are better. They can reduce the asthma medicines. So again, I keep meaning to write a book about all these topics, but that would be a good one on asthma because I really think they're taking the wrong approach when they start thinking about acid reducing medicines for asthma. You really need to stop the reflux, and you can do that with diet. There's no doubt in my mind.
Mm. So the other particulates, the gastric juices, not just the acid, but if we're having reflux, that causes that can be a cause of asthma. You also talked about that these drugs can cause nutrient deficiencies like magnesium, which magnesium is the most out of all the minerals, it's the most important. There's some studies that show that it's related, it helps over 1,800 enzymatic processes in the body, that it's more important than calcium, and it's harder to get now, especially since so few people eat enough foods that may contain magnesium, because we can't guarantee just because it's a legume doesn't mean it was grown
Mm.
in magnesium rich soil. So we're kind of we need to eat a variety of fruits and vegetables, and hopefully some magnesium's in there, or take a really good magnesium supplement and avoid things that would deplete our magnesium, like certain drugs. But a deficiency of magnesium can also trigger asthma like symptoms. And so that's sort of that 1-2 punch. We have a Facebook group. And in the Facebook group, I asked that listeners post questions, especially questions for specific guests. I have one question for you, by a woman named Michelle. And I'm very excited for you to be here today, because I have a feeling that your app and your diet are really going to help her. She says, I can't gain weight to save my life, and I'm an ectomorph, but also I can only eat certain foods because I have esophageal strictures, and a very rare illness called primary achalasia. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And I also have LES, or lower esophageal sphincter. She doesn't have a lower esophageal sphincter because it was surgically removed, and she has severe GERD, So she's looking for any answers that would help her. Would your diet also help someone who doesn't have a lower esophageal sphincter?
Well, there's a lot in that question. So, and first of all, before we pick apart some of these topics, just remember that we're just talking some science here. She does need to be in touch with her own doctor,
Absolutely.
and she shouldn't just follow my advice and go on her way. And by the way, I'm a microbiologist. I'm not a licensed medical practitioner. So we're talking science, but she should definitely be in touch with her own, medical team on this. So this achalasia is a rare disorder. It does affect the lower esophageal sphincter. It's hard for food to pass into the stomach. So there are some, physical kind of mechanical issues that are really beyond the scope of the fast track diet, and that this just goes to those, identifying underlying causes and figuring out a solution to those. So the part of the thing the lower esophageal sphincter does is after you swallow, it loosens up, but then it closes and maybe even helps push the food the rest of the way down. And so when that's damaged, that's what this achalasia it's pronounced, is all about. And so that is something that she's going to have to, manage with her doctor, with her surgeons, and deal with that issue. The other thing you mentioned was that she had trouble keeping weight on. Is that
Yes.
correct? That was part of it. So, of course, people do need to be able to consume enough food to begin with to maintain their weight. And you need to make sure, in particular, you have enough protein and fats. Those are the two absolutely required, nutrients and minerals and vitamins. Carbohydrates are technically not a nutritional requirement, but she has to you have to be able to get a healthy diet into your stomach so it can make its way into the small intestine and undergo the whole digestive process and the proper nutrients absorbed. So that's one issue. But I do work with people that do struggle to maintain weight. And so there's a number of issues that can be going on there. First of all, if you have SIBO or you have dysbiosis and you have a lot of bacteria, we talked about the ability of these bacteria to damage your small intestine, and therefore you wouldn't absorb foods as well, right? A lot of drugs and things you could be on that can impact that as well. People without their gallbladder, for the most part, are able to digest fats all right, but sometimes people have a little trouble with fats if they've had gallbladder surgery. So any kind of surgery, any kind of issue with your pancreas, or your liver, you need to make sure that you're on top of that, because those can all affect how well you absorb nutrients. But with some people, it's really a simple matter of for whatever reason, they're worried about cholesterol, or there's been so much dogma over the years about needing less fat and being a very low fat diet. And so people end up not even consuming adequate amounts of fat. And that's really probably one of the key nutrients you need if you're in a weight loss situation. You need to be consuming enough healthy fats. And of course, not too many of the heavily processed, high pressure, heat treated vegetable oils, which they're very susceptible to oxidation, and you can have a lot of oxidation processes. They're actually dangerous. But cold pressed olive oil, maybe the saturated fats in coconut oil, as well as, in my view, a healthy diet is an animal-based diet with seafood and fatty fish, mackerel, salmon, but also plenty of green leafy vegetables. Most vegetables, not the real starchy ones, but most vegetables are actually fairly low in carbohydrate in these FP points. If you looked at the mobile app, there's I don't know, well over 100 vegetables on there, maybe 150, but something like 50 of them are really low FP. So fresh green vegetables and herbs is something people should make sure they consume a decent amount of. But I would start there. I would start looking for things that could result in the inability to absorb the full complement of nutrients and minerals and vitamins you need. So there may be some supplementation involved and so forth, but If I worked with somebody like that, I would make sure that she understood it was a team effort with her doctors to come up with ideas and strategies to pursue to get her back to a point where she was healthy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain that. It also helps us to understand how great it would be to work with you. I think if someone, now, do you take on clients? Could someone work with you over Skype if they would love to no longer have IBS or no longer have their heartburn and get back to a place where their digestion is strong and healthy?
I do. My calendar's a little full, and the reason is I only take on 3 appointments a day, tops. And the reason is for that is because I spend many hours after I'm on the phone call with people researching their issue and putting together these written recommendations. So I only take 3 appointments a day, but it is something I do regularly. And so, yeah, when we can take somebody into our program, we're happy to do it.
Oh, wonderful. Very cool. Now, what about stress? The autonomic nervous system's fight or flight response, so the sympathetic nervous system response, really can do a number on our digestion. Have you seen that that stress can cause IBS or stress can cause heartburn, or it's a contributing factor in it? Have you seen science to support that?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. When it comes to stress, I mean, I have my own deadlines and commitments, and sometimes I think to myself, what's really going to kill us all is too much stress in our life. So, you don't have to convince me stress is bad. I really do think it is bad for all of our whole body, every aspect of our health. Um, and of course, having a nervous stomach, and you talk, if you're before a big speech and you have to go to the bathroom and you have loose stools, there's no doubt there's a connection between kind of worry and stress and your gut. So I think it is absolutely a factor. But in terms of reflux, it's interesting you asked that question because when I was doing my research on acid reflux and diet, and I discovered this connection with carbohydrates. And if I significantly reduce the carbohydrates and improve my digestion, my reflux completely went away. And the interesting thing about that is during that time, I was working for a biotech company in Southern California. I was writing this first book late at night, till 2 in the morning, then going in and working all day. I was traveling regularly internationally for a number of projects I was working on. I was maximally stressed. And yet my reflux was gone. And so you don't have to convince me that stress is bad, but yet, at least in my case, when I control my diet and behaviors, I did not have reflux even when I was under a lot of stress.
I love it. That's very exciting that even under a high stress situation, you were able to completely heal what was going on with this diet that you share with us. So, of course, the links to everything you do is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. Tell us a bit about this app and how to use it. Do we read the book and then get the app, or can we just get the app and begin to eat this way?
Sure. Some people, the app is kind of where the rubber meets the road, and some people will just get the app and wing it. It does have a lot of tools. It has many mini chapters in it, so you can kind of read up on the concepts. It has a list of 800 different foods, and it has all their FP values, which is essentially symptom potential, how likely the food is to give you a symptom, and what serving size you need to stick to. So it has about 800 foods. We're updating it at the moment, and we hope to release it in the next month or two. So it will have over 1,000 foods, plus a lot of other improvements. So with the app, you can, and it's voice recognition. You can just be in a grocery market and say into the phone cabbage, and the cabbage entry will come up. It will show you the serving size in grams and also common measures, maybe cups, and so how many points there are, and so you'll know how much you can buy. So it's very easy to access the foods. They can also be easily added to your specific meal plan. So when you click on the meals, it will tell you, you hit the plus sign and it will say, well, you want to do breakfast, lunch, dinner, or a snack. And you select which one, and then you just select the food and the serving size, and it will automatically tally these points, these FP points. And then if you have symptoms that day, you can also say, now I have symptoms, hit that. It will ask you which symptom and then the severity of it, 1 to 10. So it will track your symptoms. And then when you look at the main page, it will show you in either a week view or a monthly view your daily FP points and your daily symptoms. So you can see both tracking there in front of you. Now, just to make the connection between what do these points really mean? Well, the points in both the books and the mobile app are derived from an equation that I developed based on the glycemic index. The glycemic index measures how quickly carbohydrates from any food enter the bloodstream relative to glucose, which is easy to absorb. And that's how they do it. They measure it in 10 people and they come up with this value. Well, obviously you don't want too many carbs in your blood and have a diabetes, but I was more interested in carbohydrates that remain behind in the small intestine when you consume all these different foods. So I realized I could use the glycemic index from any food to calculate what this FP value, which is essentially grams of carbohydrate from that food persisting in the intestine. So when something has an FP of 10, what does that mean? Well, when you look at that's 10 grams of carbs persisting in your intestines, not being absorbed quickly. And when you think of what that means, there's been studies that show that 30 grams of unabsorbed carbohydrates allow bacteria to produce 10 liters of gas. 30 grams, it's basically 1 ounce, right? So this 10 grams, if food has 10 FP points, what does it mean? Well, it's 1/3 of 10 liters. So it would be 3.3 liters of gas in this little bowl of basmati rice.
So and that's how much we're either burping or coming out the other end, passing
Yeah,
gas.
yeah.
That's a
So
lot.
just for an example, with basmati rice, which is kind of one of the harder to digest rices, just a half cup has 10 points. And that gives you 3.3 liters of gas. Whereas if you switched instead to jasmine rice, which has a glycemic index of about 94, and an FP of about 2 or 3 for the same serving size, if that, maybe 2. That 2 grams is 1/15 of that 10 liters of gas. So it's much less gas if you had the jasmine rice over the basmati rice. So that's the way the app is used and the book to compare different foods. The app can be used. The book, of course, will go into a lot more detail on digestion and all of these food groups and these underlying causes. So if you're really interested in the approach, I think the book is helpful to read because it's a book with a lot of information in it.
But if you're like done suffering, you're like, I am sick of suffering. I'm sick of having the symptoms. I want it over today. You get the app, you start using it right away.
You can do that, yes.
And then if you want to understand everything behind it, you can get the book.
Exactly.
But the app is like, I love how you started off by saying it's where the rubber hits the road. Now I really get it. And I love that it tracks symptoms because you can really start to go, wow,
Mm,
those
mm.
bananas, man. Every time I eat bananas, I'm getting this. So it's like a kind of like a food journal in a sense where it's helping us to identify what
Yes.
foods. Now, a really common thing people say is people who have heartburn, they go, oh, I can't do tomatoes or tomato sauce. I always get heartburns with tomato. Is that because tomatoes really high at FP? That's really high, that leaves a lot of gas. It causes a
Mm,
lot of gas.
yeah. And that's a good point. So there are tomato sauce. It depends too. If you make your own fresh with just tomatoes, there's a little less sugar in it. The commercial stuff has more sugar. So a small serving, just maybe a quarter cup, has an FP. I don't know. I could look it up, but maybe 4 or 5, even 6. So it does have some FP to it, some carbohydrates in it. There is a thought some people really do think that tomato sauce bothers them, maybe even beyond the FP. And so whether it does have some effect on the lower esophageal sphincter or something like that, it is one of those kind of finicky foods that some people can tolerate okay. I recommend when people have, like, say you have a couple of meatballs for dinner, I recommend people just put a couple of tablespoons of tomato sauce over it. And that way you keep the points low, you keep the
Right.
tomato sauce. But this whole idea you bring up of basically trigger food diet approach to GERD, it's been pretty heavily, debunked. High fat
Mm.
foods is one of the big ones, tomatoes and citrus fruit, coffee. So the American Medical Association, continuing medical education for doctors, they have stated that routine global elimination of food for a trigger of reflux is not recommended for GERD. So they've given up on diet, and it was based on a 2006 systematic review on diets. But what happened is they threw away the baby with the bathwater. Because this trigger food approach didn't work, they gave up on diets. And so if people want to read more about the details of this, they can just Google what really causes acid reflux and GERD. And it should take them to a four-part blog on digestivehealthinstitute.org where we talk about all of these issues. So when we get into this, well, why did some of these foods get on this list? What about fatty foods? Well, first of all, it's well established in the scientific literature that fats don't cause reflux. And yet people still think the fats are causing their reflux. It's crazy. But here's one possible explanation. What do fatty foods contain a lot of besides fat? Carbs. People think of French fries as fatty foods, but they're all carbohydrates and they're cooked in such a way that reduces the glycemic index and increases the SFP value. What are some other ones? Fried fish and fried chicken. The chicken and fish are not going to bother you, but all that batter is made with wheat or corn. So in this article, if people want to read that, they'll see I just kind of pick apart why the standard diet approach, why it failed, and why we shouldn't give up on diet in spite of that.
So, just to wrap my brain around the FP, so is it fiber that's left behind, or is it more of a simple sugar that's left behind? It's not absorbed quickly, because I'm thinking of like we want to eat a certain amount of fiber to get everything moving, right? To have a healthy gut, and there's soluble and insoluble fiber in different kinds of fruit. Are there certain fruit, like is that some fruit is unhealthy when we're trying to gain control of our GERD because some fruit is high FP, or is this more of the, because you've been talking a lot about processed foods thus far?
Mm. Yeah, so it's a good question. And let's talk about what the five carbohydrates that are driving these FP points. But before we do, I wanted to stay on fiber for a minute because you voiced something that's a pretty common belief, and that is we need fiber to move our bowels, right? And that is really has been challenged. For instance, a 2012 study showed that actually reducing or even eliminating fiber was highly effective in relieving constipation compared to adding moderate amounts of fiber or higher amounts of fiber. These are for people with idiopathic constipation. Constipation, they don't know the cause. That's why they call it idiopathic. The people that had the most fiber, they weren't having a bowel movement, but every 6.5 days or so. And people in the medium amount of fiber were having it every 3.5 days, and the people on no fiber having it every day. And just in terms of the IBS too, right? There's the IBS side of things. A lot of the studies on high fiber diets, they have a high dropout rate because people get these IBS symptoms. So even if it was to help your constipation, if you're bloated and in cramps and you have all of these other symptoms, it's a terrible situation. There was a study by Dr. John Hunter in the UK in 2004. He found that a no-fiber diet was as effective for treating irritable bowel syndrome as was the powerful antibiotic metronidazole.
Oh my gosh. So would that be a ketogenic diet that's just focusing on fat and proteins?
In his case, it wasn't. He just eliminated fiber from people's diet. And by the way, he was using a technique back then where they put people in rooms and they measured every bit of gas leaving their body from either end. And so he found their gas levels dropped tremendously, and it was comparable to this powerful antibiotic. So no question, bacteria can ferment a lot of this fiber, and it is a good thing if you're surviving a certain amount of fiber in your diet, and even on the fast track diet, you have plenty of green leafy vegetables. And as long as you're within your FP limits, you can still have a lot of vegetables, and you do get fiber from those. But but limiting fiber is part of putting your gut microbes on a diet. And the other four, lactose, right? But Northern Europeans tend to be lactose tolerant, so they wouldn't have to worry about lactose so much. But most people, lactose, fructose, half the world doesn't digest and absorb fructose efficiently. Resistant starch. We talked about the starch that crystallizes when you cool rices, but also there's a lot of resistant starch. It's a species of starch called amylose. People can look it up. It's a linear type of starch that's much harder to digest, and that increases the resistant starch content of foods. So the low FP foods we stress have more of the easy to digest amylopectin kind of starch, less of the amylose. So there's a whole starch thing. So let's see, where were we? Lactose, fructose, resistant starch. We talked about fiber, and then the other one is sugar alcohols. And there's one where you can have too much of these sugar alcohols in some of these low carb snack bars and things like that, and that can really, jack up your digestive tract because they're not digested, but they're heavily fermented by bacteria in the gut. So those are the five, and this FP equation quantitatively measures these five carbohydrates in any food. And so that's the power of the fast track diet. It will allow you to go on a diet quantitatively. It's never saying you can't have this or you can't have that, but it is saying you need to watch the amount because of these points.
Mm. Can you give us an example of what a day would look like for someone? Let's say someone's trying to heal their GERD, and then another person is trying to heal their IBS. Would they eat the same and look at keeping their FPs the same at the same level, or is it sort of a different plan for each person?
Yeah, that's a good point. When we first wrote the books, we had ranges of around 30 points per day, and 20 to 30, and then higher, and then up to 40, and even greater than 45 points a day for people that were feeling, pretty good. But we've been in the app and also in the clinic where we are involved. We've been lowering the points a little bit more based on our readers and people on our Facebook group that are like some people with real challenging conditions like laryngopharyngeal reflux, LPR. They're telling us, you know what, at 30 points per day, I still had this, my throat symptoms drive me crazy, but you know what? I went down to 15 and it's working. And so they're telling us now how many points a day are working for them, and we're listening. So a typical day, I mean, you can imagine for breakfast anytime and by the way, eating, we don't focus just on breakfast foods. Eating a regular meal, you could have some leftovers, lamb or some fish for breakfast. Yeah, of course you could have eggs and bacon. If you are going to have starches, that's where you need to stop being a little careful. Some slices of some types of bread have much lower points than others. Like you wouldn't want 7 grain bread. That's 7 points or more per slice. You'd want something uh, uh, um, like a French baguette is lower in points. A regular white bread is lower in points. But of course, even when you do that, I wouldn't have 2 slices. I'd have one, and I'd also eat slowly and chew well. Remember the amylase conversation we had about giving amylase in your saliva more time. So you might try something like that. You could have a little wedge of melon, cantaloupe. You could have some strawberries, but you wouldn't want a whole ton of fruit or a whole bunch of starch or a big bowl of cereal or even oatmeal because it's got a lot of fermentable material in it. So that'd be breakfast. Snacks. You could have some celery with cream cheese. You could have few rice crackers. Don't go too crazy. Anything with aged cheese because all the carbohydrates are already fermented before you eat it is good to have. I mean, there's just so many options. You could have some leftover chicken wings. Anything animal based is 0 points unless it has added carbohydrates. So there's no limit on animal based points, animal based foods. There's no limit on fats. There's no limit on proteins. The only limit is on certain carbohydrate-based foods. So at lunch, maybe you wanted to have a stir fry and you made some chicken and some green vegetables, maybe a little zucchini from the garden and some celery and a little bit of onions. Don't overdo it on the onions because they do contain fructose oligosaccharides, which is technically a fiber and has some points. But you could put a little bit for flavor, and you might have that over Asian sticky rice, which, like jasmine rice, is actually relatively low FP.
If it's fresh.
If it's cooked fresh, you're learning. Good point. And don't, cook it properly, eat it fresh, and only serve yourself a half a cup and eat slowly and chew well. And of course, we're stricter with the diet when people are really in the throes with this and they have a lot of bacteria in their small intestine. They have a lot of symptoms, a lot of bloating, belching. Once things start to get better, your digestive tract improves. Your small intestine will heal. Your villi and microvilli will heal and replace themselves. And your enzymes can come back. So your tolerance will improve over time the more compliant you are with the diet.
And so there's light at the end of the tunnel. And especially with your app, I love anything where we can track our progress. I love because, we sort of forget what life was like a month ago, right? And
Mm.
we think we remember, but we don't. And I'd hate for people to keep repeating the same mistake over and keep having the same symptoms and not being able to identify what's going on. So your app really allows us to identify, wow, I was 15 points and now I can tolerate 25. And a few months later, now I can tolerate 30. A few months later, now I can tolerate 40. And it opens them up to being able to, because now it allows them to see their healing, they're digesting well, they're not fermenting, they're digesting. That means that they're absorbing their nutrition, and other things are starting to
Mm-hmm.
change, their energy, their mood. It's all coming back into balance, and soon they realize that through your program, they now no longer have GERD, and now everything's starting to work much better because all the cells in their body are getting the nutrition they need, and that's wonderful. And if they go a little overboard, because like you said, go on vacation, then they can go, wow, you know what? I ate like 60 FP that day because I was just like going nuts on a cruise. And they see some symptoms come back, and they don't have to worry that they're regressing. They just know, let's get back on the program. Let's figure out how to eat for me. And I also like that your program, like you said, is the Weight Watchers of of basically healing the gut. You're looking at, it's not that you're trying to tell people like, don't eat this, eat that. You're just saying, hey, here's your healthier options. You're not saying people don't eat rice. You're saying, here's the healthiest rice option. You're not saying don't eat vegetables or don't eat bread. You're just saying, here's the healthier option for your specific issue. And this is what's so amazing about food. Everyone wants the perfect diet, but there's not one perfect diet. Because if someone
Mm.
has GERD or IBS, they should not be on, the diet I'm on. I'm on a diet to get different results, and like I'm eating, like not intentionally, but about 70 grams of fiber are in my diet just because I'm eating a whole foods plant-based diet and I'm loving it and I'm having an amazing results, just absolutely outstanding results.
Yeah, I mean, good point. For people that do well on a plant-based diet and a lot of fermentable fiber in the diet, and they're not having symptoms and they're not miserable, more power to you. I don't have a problem with that at all.
There's not one diet for everyone, and your diet is phenomenal. Like, you're getting results, and I'm so excited. And now you have got a Facebook group. So those that get the app, can they join your Facebook group?
Anybody can join the Facebook group. So we have about 8,500 people on there now. Everybody's talking about recipes, comparing notes, and they're driving some change with us too. We do listen to them. We listen to them, their feedback about the mobile app. Like for instance, we had a whole variety of these GI conditions, GI symptoms you could put in, and even some cough and certain things. But and then we had other. Well, people didn't like other. They wanted to be able to put in their exact symptom, whatever it was. They wanted to be able to write that down. And so we have a new update coming up soon, and it's going to have custom symptoms and a lot of improvements on with usability. And so we're listening to our people.
Very cool. Now, what it does is the cause of IBS the same thing? Like, is this the same thing that causes the GERD? Is the food's fermenting, not digesting, and it's sort of throwing everything out of balance, or is that why your diet is so good for reversing IBS as well as GERD, or is there a different reason why your diet really helps reverse IBS?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. There's no question in my mind that similar mechanisms are at work here, because otherwise you wouldn't have that 50% overlap. Why do all the people with GERD have IBS and all the people with IBS, so many of them have GERD? There must be something similar going on. But one thing could be that with IBS, there were some recent studies done just over the last year or so that showed that people, a couple of different types of data, one using smart pill technology that measures acidity, and that one showed that people with IBS actually have more acidity in the early part of the large intestine, showing that maybe the problem is more not the small intestine, but the early part of the large intestine, because so much of a bigger, when bacteria ferment carbohydrates, they produce short chain fatty acids, right? What's the last word? Acids. So the pH goes down. It's more acidic. And so that paper was suggesting that these people might have something like kind of LIBO, a large intestinal bacterial overgrowth in the early part, down by the ileocecal valve. And maybe it's not isolated to the small intestine. There was another study using a radioactive tracer diet during lactulose breath testing that showed that by the time the lactulose, and that's what allows bacteria to ferment the lactulose and produce the hydrogen that's detected in the breath test, blah, 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 long story. But this radioactive tracer was tracking the lactulose, and it was saying by the time people are positive for SIBO, even if it's only 80 minutes or 70 minutes, they're saying that lactulose is already reaching the large intestine, and what these people really have is rapid, faster motility, rapid transit. And so there's a couple of challenges to the SIBO theory of IBS, which is just kind of interesting. I personally think it's probably a combination of both. So we know we have some large intestine fermentation, some small intestine fermentation, and then where's GERD fit into all of this? So we're looking at this now, and we're trying to put some data together that will show where exactly does this fit in, and is it just about where the fermentation and gas is being produced, or is there also an effect or a weakening or something of the lower esophageal sphincter? So there's a few questions left, but there's just no question in my mind that when you take away some of this fermentable material, that the symptoms improve dramatically and can be completely reversed.
I love that because it's so safe. For anyone to experiment, I think everyone should experiment with their diet, no matter what. I think we should definitely experiment with our diet because we can use food as medicine, and you just don't know. You just don't know if whatever your health is right now, you could get better. It can get better. We can always figure out how to
Yeah,
improve. And
yeah,
you mentioned earlier on in the interview that this diet helps to minimize malabsorption. So said in the positive, it helps the body heal so that it can increase absorption. But you also said you can reverse leaky gut and fibromyalgia, rosacea, because these are all linked to what gut health.
right.
Can you talk a bit about um, other things that people could experience? So let's say other symptoms. So
Mm,
someone might go, well, I don't have GERD and I don't have IBS, but they might have other things and they didn't
mm.
realize that actually the root cause is in their gut. So fibromyalgia, rosacea, what other issues have you seen resolved by people getting on your diet?
Mm. Yeah, well, I have had a couple of reports now, actually recently, about people that have had Barrett's esophagus. That's where your lower esophagus, the cells there start to morph into more to look more like the cells from your stomach or intestines, and it's considered a precancerous condition. So there's a lot of um, real concern about people getting Barrett's, because uh, when you have Barrett's, you have a much higher chance of getting esophageal cancer later. So it's a kind of a stepping stone. And so I had a couple of people on the diet saying, yeah, I just can't believe this, but my symptoms are better. And not only that, I went to see my ENT and he scoped me and my Barrett's is gone. So, that's just two reports of people that have been on the diet and told me about it. Obviously, you need to study this thing in a more controlled fashion, but it makes sense to me that all of the treatments we've been doing before are not stopping reflux. And there is some research suggesting that bile, here's bile again, may be the worst problem for Barrett's esophagus as opposed to the acid. And that once again, if you can prevent the reflux itself, you might be able to prevent the damage of bile in terms of leading to Barrett's esophagus. So that's one thing. You brought up a lot of other things. There's basically a couple of categories I think of, and they're all related to these functional gastrointestinal disorders and SIBO. Some systemic illnesses that aren't necessarily for certainty, autoimmune, like rosacea, fibromyalgia. We're not sure chronic fatigue, if they're autoimmune or not, but they are linked to SIBO. And there are studies that show that when you improve SIBO, you improve some of these conditions. So there's at least proof of principle, and some of that work is done with rifaximin, the antibiotic. Again, I'm not recommending antibiotics, at least as a first line of therapy, unless somebody's really sick, maybe then. But I am recommending diet as the first thing people try. But there's proof of principle that when you can address SIBO, you can improve some of those things. The other class of illnesses is autoimmune, diabetes and a whole variety of other issues. And there's kind of a unified theory emerging that autoimmune diseases as a group, all of them, and there's so many of them, but that they all originate at first as a leaky gut. And they do know that with SIBO, your gut does become leakier. And there's not been a ton of studies on that, but enough to show that there's some increase in leakiness. Of course, remember our discussion before to watch out for the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, because that might do the same thing.
Where do you think it all started? Where do you think the issue, someone's walking along in life, like you said, you were eating how you were eating, and then all of a sudden you started to get these symptoms. Was it that you were eating more carbs, different kinds of carbs, that you're eating maybe more processed food, more sugar? Where does it all begin? Because once we have it, it kind of is this chicken and the egg. It's like, what's causing the leaky gut? Like, where does it all start?
Mm.
Because when you talk about fermenting, right, you're talking about the body's fermenting, it's creating all this gas, and that's causing a lot of these problems. And so your diet is, let's stop eating or limit the amount of sugars that can ferment. And that really brings everything back into balance. But something had to damage us. Didn't something have to damage us so that we weren't digesting properly?
Yeah. So great question. I think of a couple of different lines of inquiry with that kind of a question. One is, there's no question our gut microbiota has changed. Our diet has changed. We have, first of all, we have an eat anything, eat everything diet. We have easy access to so much food in the West. And so if you think back to Paleolithic times, people had to really work to get food. I've talked about a TV show that I used to watch. It was on the Weather Channel, a Canadian show called Fat Guys in the Woods. And this survivalist would bring these city dwellers out into the wilderness, and they would have to survive for a week. And I really liked watching that show because these guys learned a lot, and he would teach them all these survival skills. But one thing was clear: they were hungry. They were really getting hungry because it's hard to find food in the wild. And they would occasionally trap something, an animal, and they would dig up some, roots and find a couple of berries, or this kind of leaf is edible, but they were hungry. It's not that easy to find food in the wild. So I think in Paleolithic times, and of course, different diets depended on where on the globe that each, person's lineage evolved. But I do think the one common denominator was fruits weren't as sweet, fruits were smaller, vegetables were smaller, not as sweet. Fruits and vegetables were seasonal. You know, a lot of places on the planet, especially as the climate got a little colder, depended more on animal-based foods. But we didn't eat as much, and also we had a fully kind of robust, diverse microbiota. Okay, we probably could tolerate more fibers and things back then, depending again where, maybe closer to the equator, you could tolerate more fibers. But now we're eating too much. We're eating the wrong foods. We consume a lot of chemicals and preservatives, and we all take antibiotics. It's common to take a lot of antibiotics. And so here we have this less robust, less diverse microbiota. That's one issue. But again, why do most of us in the West not have heartburn when we're 18 to 20 years old? Why does it develop, in the late 20s and early 30s? And to answer that part, I can't help wondering if, first of all, we've got this compromised microbiota, but it doesn't take that much to throw things off. And it may be the same way we become a little less athletic in our 30s and 40s. We can't throw a ball as far, we can't run as fast. We probably don't digest as well either, many of us. And so it doesn't take that much of a digestive problem or difference if you're on an eat everything diet for that to show as symptoms. And so one of the things we haven't talked about, but I think, good ways to mimic our Paleolithic, ancestors is to fast more, intermittent fasting. I often don't eat a thing before, 1 in the afternoon. I'm just used to it. And I have more fats in my diet, so I don't get as hungry. So it allows me to do that more easily. But again, I'm not a construction worker either these days. So that you might need your breakfast if you're out, doing physical work.
Sure, but we could do intermittent fasting. We could limit our eating window to 8 hours a day and eat a really nice hearty breakfast and a
Mm-hmm.
medium-sized lunch and then maybe a snack later in the afternoon, then skip dinner. Go to bed a little hungry. It's okay. Drink some water. And then, open up that window of fasting. I love that you brought that up. I've had other
Mm-hmm.
people on the show. My favorite episode about fasting would be episode 230 with Dr. Alan Goldhammer. It kind of, like you're blowing my mind today multiple times. And he kind of blew my mind around fasting. And he has a whole fasting clinic. So he gets to clinically study people fasting, tens of thousands of people in his career, and seen a lot of things reverse, even cancer. And he was able to publish that finding. So you'll love listening to that
Mm.
episode. But I love that
That's
you
two
brought that up.
220.
Episode 230.
Oh,
The
230.
joke to remember that it's the best time to go to a dentist.
I will check that out. I made a note. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up because I think we're so, especially people with gut issues, we're so fearful, right, around diet. And some people don't even want to eat. Right now, of course, there's some people who have lost too much weight, and he talks about how to do fasting with people who've lost too much weight. He incorporates juices, or maybe you eat under 500 calories a day, which can also mimic fasting, or intermittent fasting, which is what you've brought up, which is fantastic.
Mm.
And so there's a healing mechanism that turns on in the body when we do
Mm.
fasting. And so we shouldn't be afraid of it. We shouldn't be afraid not to eat, but we need to bring balance. No, nothing
Sure.
to an extreme, right?
Right. And you just reminded me of something, by the way. You were talking about fasting and you were also talking about weight loss. It is counterintuitive that you would do anything to cut back on calories for people that aren't able to gain weight. And so most people are stuck in a loop with like, I need to eat more. I can't gain enough weight. I need to eat more and more and more. And remember we talked about SIBO and damaging the small intestine?
Mm-hmm.
We also talked about sometimes if you have a lot of bacteria there, they can deconjugate these bile acids that we talked about. And so you can get some bile acid malabsorption, you get some poor digestion of fats. And so people are like, well, I can't digest fats, so I can't eat fats because I have this condition and I can't gain weight, so I need to eat more and more. But really, to break that cycle when you have SIBO going on, sometimes you do have to eat a little bit less and watch it for a period of time and clear those bacteria out so you can get that healing so that you can absorb these critical nutrients. And even with people that don't digest fats well, they're like, I just can't have fats, I don't digest them. But what I say in that situation is, okay, we need to really think about that and look at that. But let's also at least consider the possibility that the problem is SIBO. And to get rid of SIBO, SIBO can't get energy from fats in the anaerobic gut because it requires something called beta oxidation. So they can't get the calories from fats. So they get it from the carbs. So stopping fats isn't going to reduce those bacteria, but cutting back on the carbs will. So people get a mindset and they think, fats, forget about fats, so I need more carbs. But I'm like, well, more carbs might be end up giving you the problem digesting fats. And it's the same with intermittent fasting. If you have SIBO and you have a lot of bacteria and damage in your small intestine, yes, you have to be really careful if you're already lost a lot of weight. But you have to look at it in a real thoughtful manner about, well, what is causing this inability to absorb proper nutrients.
And by limiting the carbs, like, and the FP, we're limiting the amount of fermenting. We're limiting the amount of gas, which is doing damage, physical damage to the body. And then we are also limiting the food supply to the bad bacteria. What about the good bacteria? How do we build up good bacteria? How do we get that microbiome to become diverse and healthy?
Mm. Yeah, that's an awesome question. And by the way, a lot of people, use those terms synonymously, like, well, why are we starving our bacteria? Or they're saying, I want to starve my bacteria. I don't feel good. I want to starve my bacteria. So first of all, these diets are not starving the bacteria. Bacteria in our gut evolved for the main purpose. Yes, they make vitamins. Yes, they help train the immune system. Yes, they protect against invading pathogens. But the main reason all animals, not just humans, evolved to have bacteria in their gut was to salvage calories from the environment. If you can't find enough to eat and you're scrapping around and you find, some plants and roots and bark and leaves and, you're just starving, you need to eat something. Even if our body can't digest a lot of these nutrients and fibers, the bacteria can. It's this diverse population of bacteria with thousands of different enzymes. They work collaboratively to break down these tough, complex fibers and turn them into fats. And those fats can be used by us as nutrients. So these bacteria have saved us from starvation countless times through our evolution. So all of a sudden, we're so worried about starving them. Well, that's what they evolved for, to deal with that. So they're going to be robust enough to survive those kinds of ordeals. So I don't think you have to worry about starving them. Nobody's starving the bacteria. And on diets like the fast track diet, there's all these tons of vegetables you can eat. So part of your diet is something called animal-based fibers. There's a lot of things. The oligosaccharides and lactose in milk are carbohydrates, but they're produced from animals. The cartilage and things in bone broth, has sugars attached to it, and so it's fermentable material. So we're not starving these microbes. Now, what about the diversity when you're not feeding so many of these fermentable carbs, or you're fasting? There was an interesting study that I really liked by a very brilliant researcher named Marlene Riemle out of Austria. A few years back now, she did a study where she had people fast and then she looked at their microbiota, used gene probes, RNA probes, which kind of bacteria are there, which ones are falling or rising. And it was interesting that she found you could consider it an uptick in diversity with fasting, with less food, but that it was especially focused on the important gut lining associated bacteria, the ones that are really critical and that line the gut microbe, the ones that are involved in a food chain that's based on mucus. Remember, we talked about our gut producing mucus that's 80% polysaccharide, 80% carbs. It's feeding these bacteria. It's bacteria like Akkermansia muciniphila. This bacteria hasn't been known for that long, but they found out it can grow in an agar plate if you just give it mucus, sole carbon and nitrogen and energy source. That's all it needs. Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, and other real important microbe, Bacteroides fragilis, the one I used to work on when I was at Tufts, and other relative of Fragilis Bacteroides, theta, iota, omicron, very metabolically diverse. These bacteria know how to get calories out of anything and can feed and cross feed off of the mucus that our own body produces. So when we starve, before we starve too much, our gut mucus comes along and nurses these bacteria along. So our gut is a very robust thing. And sometimes I think the worst thing we can do to it is overnutrition. We've actually evolved to survive undernutrition. It's overnutrition that I think is a big risk factor.
I
Of course,
love it.
there are limits to that. You can starve to death. We
Of
don't want
course.
that.
But you're so true. You bring up a great point that we are most of our diseases to this day right now in the modern world are diseases of excess, diseases of lifestyle. And thank God our listeners have found us so that they can start learning from people like you so they can bring their body back into balance by using food as medicine instead of using food as a playground, as an amusement park. Because it's so easy to get wrapped up in the marketing and use food as entertainment instead of food as fuel and medicine. Um,
Absolutely.
we can even there's some forms of entertainment out there that can be damaging to the a person, and we just have to remember that we don't do those forms of entertainment that are damaging to us or either our psyche or our body. Um, like I'm not going to go mountain climbing without any gear. It's just that some people can. I'm not going to do it, because there's a
I've done
potential
it
for
in
damage,
I've
right?
done that in flip flops myself before. That wasn't a great idea.
Oh my gosh. And, we go swimming with sharks, right? There's some form of entertainment that could lead to damage. And so we have to remember that, like, just using food as entertainment can lead to damage. We can get bit by the shark. We can get bit by this nonchalant diet of looking for fun out of our food. What do you think about using either probiotics or eating fermented foods, cultured foods to help repopulate the gut, especially after having taken antibiotics?
Yeah, so and they are used to recover from antibiotics, but of course it all depends on what is the strain, what are you taking to recover? Because here we have a complex ecosystem with hundreds and up to even 1,000 different species, and if you count all the substrains, it's just incredibly diverse. It's a rainforest, and then we're going to try to outthink evolution and say, well, we think if we add lactobacillus Boulardii or something from a yogurt, and it's going to change everything. And I think we're realizing that it's not so simple. And some of the important strains that I was just mentioning, Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, Akkermansia eosinophila, some of the Bacteroidetes, some of the other Clostridia, some of these Firmicutes, some of these keystone species, none of them are available as a probiotic right now. But what if they were? And you can get a kind of peek into the window of what if they were by looking at the data on fecal microbiota transplantation. Because that procedure, it says, okay, we're going to give you a bowel cleanse and get rid of all your bacteria, and then we're going to come in with an infusion of some a full microbiological complement from a healthy donor, and then see how you do. Well, the reason this FMT is so popular is because it has a 95 or 96% cure rate for people who are infected with Clostridia difficile. And so we know that like people on antibiotics, and we talked about that scenario, they have more sugar, less bacteria, and this C. diff can come in, set up shop, and next thing you know, you've got this tough to treat Clostridia difficile. And it's tough to treat that with antibiotics because it makes spores that are resistant to antibiotics. But you can cure C. diff 96% of the time with no side effects with a fecal microbiota transplant. So that's how powerful it can be. Now, following on those results, people have started to look at other conditions. Well, what about IBS? What about Crohn's disease? What about ulcerative colitis? And so far, the success rate is much lower, much lower. And it's still very early on in these studies. but it's instead of being 96%, it's more in the range of 30, maybe 35. We're not even sure. It's not nearly as effective. So it leads me to at least suspect that the problem isn't as simple as just replacing the bacteria with good bacteria, that it is really your diet and digestion and how well your digestion is working.
Hmm. Have you seen the study? They took obese rats or mice, and then they had ones that were thin, and they had a nice healthy microbiome, and they did that fecal transplant. They basically took the the gut bacteria from healthy mice and gave thin mice and gave it to the obese mice, and the obese mice then
Mm,
became thin again. Like that was so they were going, whoa, is there like this relationship between having unhealthy gut and unhealthy microbiome and the root cause, one of the root causes of obesity. So again, what's the chicken or the egg? Maybe that person is eating such bad food that they're really just they're not eating your diet. They're destroying their gut. They're destroying their digestive health, and then through all of that, they're gaining weight and then having problems losing it because now everything's sort of out of balance if their gut is out of balance.
mm. Yeah, those are fascinating studies. There's a few of those out there. And, one of the common themes is essentially identifying strains that are good at getting calories out of food tend to be associated with obesity, and
Oh.
having strains that are balanced that aren't so damn good at getting calories out of food, out of these fibers and fermentable material, may have less obesity. So yeah, depending on the paper, there's been some individual strains flagged and so forth. It's an interesting area of research, but a good one, basically, that I'm just following at the moment. I'm not really diving in head first yet, but it's, yeah, interesting stuff.
It is very interesting, and I love that you're so deep into the science. You really help us to bring us to reality because there are so many myths out there around health, and it's really frustrating and confusing for those who are already suffering, and they're getting advice from their MD, and maybe they're getting advice from their friend, and they're looking on the internet. Dr. Google tells them one thing, right? And if they're suffering every day, especially with IBS or, with GERD, it's pain, and it's not only physical pain, it's emotional, mental pain because they don't see a light at the
Mm,
end of the tunnel. And so
mm.
I feel so honored and privileged to have had you here today to share your information with the listeners who are suffering from gut issues so they can get your app. The links to, of course, are going to be in the show notes. They can get on your Facebook group. We'll make sure the
Mhm.
link to your Facebook group is in the show notes. What is the name of your Facebook group?
It's basically the Fast Tract, TRACT, Fast Tract Diet official Facebook group.
Great. So we'll have the link to that in there, and of course a link to your book and your website. Now you have on your website digestivehealthinstitute.org, you have a free ebook, so I urge listeners to
Mm.
check that out.
Hmm.
Gut microbes and digestive health, fast track diet 101 is the free ebook available for download. And for those listeners who don't have gut issues, this is such a common problem nowadays that I would love for all the listeners to share this episode with the friends and family members and coworkers who they know are suffering from heartburn or have had heartburn or IBS or any kind of gut issues. Because if this could help them get on the right track, then it would just change their life, and it would be amazing how many people that we could help. Norm, thank you so much for coming here today. Is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up today's interview?
Well, I guess I could mention, what our mission is, just to, and when they go to the Facebook group, they'll read that as well. But in a nutshell, we're committed to changing the way the world perceives digestive health because we really think that it's being looked at in a way that's not as helpful as it could be. Our goal is to elevate science-based holistic and dietary solutions to a first-line therapy instead of the last thing people try, the first thing they try, for a broad range of these functional digestive disorders we talked about. And then also on our Facebook, you'll see our goal is to inspire 10 million people to transition from drugs and or antibiotic-based therapies to the fast track diet and other holistic solutions that we talk about on the Facebook group. So that's what the goal is.
What a wonderful goal. I love it. And thank you for letting us be a part of your goal and spreading this information. Norm, you're welcome back on the show anytime, because I know that we could talk about so many things. One thing I wrote down, you said gut bacteria trains the immune system, and that I thought that would be such a great episode. Diving further into understanding how really busting these myths and understanding how the gut works, how the digestion works, how we can best support it. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, and thank you for making your mission to help so many people to get off drugs and heal their body with food.
I really appreciate that, Ashley, and I'm a big fan. So good luck with your continued podcast. I will be listening to episode 230 and other ones. So
Awesome.
keep it going. Thank you.
Do you feel like you're missing something? Are you searching for the right answers to solve your health issues? Do you feel like you should have more energy and mental clarity? With everything you're doing for your health, you may be missing one key component. Our body needs 90 essential nutrients every day to function optimally. 60 minerals, 12 amino acids, 2 fatty acids, and 16 vitamins each and every day. Because of the farming practices over the last 100 years, most of our food has 60% fewer vitamins and minerals compared to just 50 years ago. So if you aren't eating 8 cups of a variety of fruits and vegetables each day, you may be missing some of your essential nutrients. These are the raw building blocks the body needs to create new healthy tissue, healthy hormones, balanced digestive system, strong muscles, bones and joints, and maintain an optimal functioning nervous system. Especially if you're experiencing more stress, or if you've gone through an illness like an infection, that takes more resources. So if you're not consuming more vitamin C and more of all the 16 vitamins and all the 60 minerals when you're going through more stress, either physical stress, emotional stress, mental stress, those stressors take more nutrients to kind of survive those bumps in the road in life. And over time, that whittles away, that kind of depletes our nutrient tanks, our stores in our body. Without these 90 essential nutrients, things start to break down. Now, you've experienced these breakdowns. Maybe you get migraines, maybe you're exhausted, maybe your hormones are out of balance, your digestion's out of balance, or you have some aches and pains. Maybe you've even been diagnosed with something. You have a series of symptoms, and if those symptoms all look like something, then we can diagnose it, right? That's what MDs can do. MDs will treat these breakdowns with drugs and mask your symptoms. But if your body has a nutrient deficiency, no amount of drugs will fix the problem. 7 years ago, I embarked on a journey to cure my diabetes, infertility, PCOS, high blood pressure, and chronic adrenal fatigue. I felt like I was a mess. Through my research, I found a company that made natural supplements to address these nutrient needs. They formulated their supplements to exceed all standards of quality. Their minerals are the most bioavailable and absorbed by the body that I have ever found. After getting on their protocols for healthy hormones and blood sugar, along with their dietary recommendations for better health, I reversed my type 2 diabetes, I reversed my infertility, I no longer had high blood pressure, my energy and vitality came back, and after 6 years of trying to get pregnant with my husband before we found these supplements, once we got on these supplements, we were able to conceive our wonderful healthy son, who's now 3 years old, and he is amazing, and we would have never had that had we not found this company. Speaking of our son, he's also taking these supplements for optimal health. His pediatrician thinks they're amazing. If you'd like to give these supplements a try and see for yourself if you're experiencing a nutrient deficiency, please go to takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Their health coaches are phenomenal. I personally know all of them. They're amazing people. And I just want you to know, as my listener, I feel like I need to protect my listeners. I would never promote anything that I didn't 100% believe in and I didn't feel was healthy or good for you. I feel like you're my tribe and I'm sharing this information. In fact, for the last 2 years, the only reason why I've been doing this podcast is so that I can help as many people as possible gain their health back. And so the health coaches at takeyoursupplements.com, I really trust that they will make sure that you're well taken care of. They will work with you to help determine the best protocol for your nutrient needs and work within your budget. They will also help to implement a holistic protocol that includes supporting a healthy diet and lifestyle. Go to takeyoursupplements.com, fill out the form, and one of their health coaches will get back to you really shortly. And then you guys can schedule a time to talk on the phone and they will work with you to help you dial in all your nutrient needs. I really look forward to hearing about your experience with them. Please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me in our Facebook group. Go to Facebook, search Learn True Health, and join our group. Let me know what you think about the wonderful health coaches at takeyoursupplements.com. And by the way, when you go to takeyoursupplements.com and you get assigned to a health coach, they're your health coach. You're not going to keep getting a different person every time. You get one person and they work with you and they hold your hand for months down the road. They're there for you to support you month after month while you're on your nutrient protocol, and they're helping you dial in your nutrient needs. They're really wonderful like that. So I know you'll enjoy your experience with them, and I'd love to hear about your experience with them. Please feel free to, you can email me as well, ashley@learntruehealth.com. I love hearing success stories. Like I said, I've been working with a supplement company for my own health for the last 7 years, and I've reversed so many issues. I love sharing this information because I think that many of you will be able to resolve your issues with nutrition, just like I've seen many people do. With that said, go to takeyoursupplements.com, fill out your information, and a health coach is very excited to start working with you and helping you get your health back.